Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, we're going to pick up where I left off in The Boys Season 1, Episode 5, Part 1 from last time. We're going to wrap up that episode today. In our last segment on The Boys, we got to the point where everyone is more or less at Believe Expo, and Homelander has left Believe Expo to go and confront Madeline Stillwell at her child's doctor's appointment because he's upset that his script, quote-unquote, reads like corporate mayonnaise. They get into it pretty far, and he ends up telling her that her baby is just an accessory. And as she walks away from him, she looks a little scared with her back turned to him, and he is glaring at the infant, Teddy. It's very strange, and also you're getting this growing sense of unease regarding Homelander. So he's not really the super nose clean kind of guy. He's not this Captain America figure that everyone has really made him seem to be up to this point. So now we're going to pick up halfway into this episode. So at the end of the last segment, Butcher had told MM to keep an eye on Hughie and had declined to say where he was about to disappear to, but he did leave. And when we pick up with this next scene, we find Butcher at someone named Rachel's house, and he tells her that he just came from a stroll around the cemetery grounds at a local church where he saw a headstone for his wife who has been missing for years. So this is the woman that he has been watching on that video in the morning while eating his Hot Pocket with a knife and fork. It is his wife, Rebecca, who disappeared about 7 or 8 years ago when the show starts in 2012. She was missing in 2012, that is. The show, I think, is set in about 2019. So he's upset that his sister-in-law didn't tell him that they were placing a headstone or that they had placed one. And he's angry that part of the family has symbolically accepted that Rebecca is dead. So he's very, very upset. This is clearly where he was disappearing to and why he did not tell MM where he was going. I'm not shocked that Billy Butcher did not want to share his feelings. So he's gone to walk around the local church and he sees the headstone. And Rachel really tells him, you know, we did that last week and my mom is getting old and she just wants a place where she can go and talk to her daughter. And she defends their choice with this and by also saying that the family just needs this to be over. They need some form of closure because Rebecca has been missing for nearly a decade at this point. And she tells him, look, she either killed herself or someone else killed her. We are not going to find her at this point. If she were able to come back to us, she would. And we need to just let it go now. And this just really enrages Billy further. he's not really gotten past the rage and retribution level, really, of his grieving process. He's not ready to accept that she's gone. But again, he's not seen any evidence that she's gone. He hasn't seen any hard physical evidence. And I can really understand him not wanting to accept the idea that she may be dead without actually having seen evidence to that end. So, they get in a fight, more or less, just a really nasty argument, and Rachel really stands her ground. You can tell how well she knows Billy by the fact that she's not really scared of him, but she is also equally angry and still telling him that they need to go ahead and just let it go at this point, that they need the sense of closure, that it hurts all of them now. And she literally says, we just need this to be over. And Billy gets really mad at her and he's like, don't say that. And she yells back at him that he wasn't the only one whose life was ruined when Rebecca disappeared, because Rachel was her sister. And Butcher is livid, but Rachel, I love that she isn't scared and that she recognizes his grief for what it is. Because Billy does kill people. We don't know if Rachel knows that, but the fact is we know that, and he doesn't blink twice before he does it. He even often takes a lot of glee from those situations. So the fact that Rachel isn't scared really tells us a lot about Billy as a person too. Even if she doesn't know that he kills people. It tells us that, at least in some contexts, the Billy that she knew was gentle, at least with the people in that specific context. And remember, people can be more than one thing, Joel, and we are different people in different contexts. You may say things with your friends that you wouldn't say in front of your mama or your grandmama. So you want to make sure that you are keeping that in mind too, as we watch these characters act in seemingly different ways in different contexts. So we know that Billy is still Billy Butcher, but we also see that he is multifaceted, based not on how he's acting right now, but on Rachel's reaction to him. He's still acting just like Billy, being blustering and just really aggressive, but Rachel is really just seeing a man grieving. So it tells us a lot about her and also a lot about him. At this point in the story, we also see A-Train watching old movies that Pop Claw made with Billy Zane, and then he goes to watch their old sex tapes, their home videos, and he finds that the teddy bear video cam that he had been using with her for that purpose has also caught her on tape killing the landlord. And you can see part of Frenchie's face caught on the film too as he's come in the door. So he has Trevor and the Vought crime unit track down who Frenchie is and all of his aliases. And then when Trevor asks about further pursuing it, he tells Trevor to forget about it and that they're working on this thing alone. And Trevor says, since when do you guys work on things alone? And all A-Train says to him is, shut up, Trevor. So it's a very interesting interaction between those two, because A-Train does indeed know this guy's first name and works with him a lot. And it also tells us that Trevor's not afraid of A-Train like a lot of people are afraid, or even just reverent of Homelander. It's different how Homelander is treated and reacted to versus all of the others. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to see what happens when Hughie goes to visit Ezekiel. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, For an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing where we're finding Butcher and his interactions with his sister-in-law, as well as A-Train watching old movies that Popclaw made, and then finding Frenchie on film coming in and blackmailing Popclaw about having killed the landlord in order to get information about Compound V. So Hughie goes to see Ezekiel at this point, and he's in there in that Diamond Club pass that he's gotten from Annie, who is feeling really uncomfortable and alone in the situation she's found herself in, and not recognizing this place that used to feel like home to her. That is the Believe Expo and these Christian superhero circuits that she used to go to from the time she was a small child. They don't feel the same anymore. The people that she is used to trusting and talking to aren't really paying attention to her concerns. They're waving them off, and it's really starting to bother her. Even her mother and Hughie have gotten to the point where she's feeling more used by them and just ignored than anything else. But she went ahead and still got Hughie those tickets to see Ezekiel, saying, it's the least I can do, right? And so when he gets inside the tent, he goes to grab a glass of orange juice. I'm not sure if they're mimosas or not. I don't know if the $15,000 makes it okay to drink liquor in this tent or alcohol in this tent. Who knows? I'm not sure what all the rules are for this expo, but it looks mostly like orange juice. And he kind of gets ignored by the waitress, but Homelander grabs one of the glasses off of the tray and hands it to Hughie and calls him by name. So he already knows Hughie's name and that he's friends with Starlight. So Hughie is a little creeped out by that, a little taken aback, and surprised, and rightly so. It is really strange how much attention Homelander is paying to him, but Homelander, like he told A-Train, is always going to have an eye on the people that he works with. That doesn't just apply to A-Train. That also applies to Starlight, and the Deep, and Queen Maeve, and Black Noir, and Translucent beforehand. So everyone who is in his immediate vicinity, who may be a liability as far as he is concerned, anyone who is not him can be a liability, he's keeping his eye on them. Now, he may trust Maeve more than the others, but he is really keeping an eye on everyone. Homelander is ever vigilant, and he can see through walls and everything. So, he is creeping out Hughie just a little bit, but, you know, Hughie's mostly creeped out because he killed Translucent, and so he knows he's done something that Homelander could potentially want to kill him for. But Homelander is not there to kill Hughie. It turns out that he is an ordained minister in Ezekiel's group called Samaritan's Embrace, and that everyone who is in that diamond tent is about to get rebaptized by Ezekiel and Homelander. So part of this experience that Hughie has signed up for in order to come in here and really blackmail Ezekiel involves going and getting baptized. So clearly everyone else is prepared for this eventuality, and they've brought a change of clothes and everything. It looks like Samaritan's Embrace is providing the towels, but Hughie is very much not prepared for this. Not only did he not know that it involved a baptism, but also, of course, Butcher did not tell him that he was going to be assigned to do this until they were already there. Everyone else had no idea. They just took a look at the security, and Butcher's like, cool, well, we're going to send Hughie in there to go ahead and get rebaptized. It's going to be the most believable out of all of us, and he seems the most innocuous. So we're sending him in. So, Hughie ends up getting rebaptized in his Billy Joel shirt. I am a big Billy Joel fan. The episode of The Orville that was all about Billy Joel was one of my absolute favorites. And I also really enjoyed how much Billy Joel is present in The Boys. So he's getting baptized, and I think it was his Piano Man shirt. And Homelander tells him right before he dunks him under that his blood pressure is high. And Homelander gives him the exact numbers. And he's like, what's wrong? Are you okay? And Hughie just says, oh yeah, I'm just afraid of water. And Homelander kind of chuckles at him and then definitely holds him underwater way too long, even after Hughie starts struggling. It's not long enough that anyone around them, including Ezekiel, really catches on or gets freaked out. But Hughie is essentially staring at Homelander from under the water with Hughie's hand over his own nose to make sure he's not losing air, and is really wanting to get up. And Homelander's just smiling down at him while he's holding him underwater. It is too long for a baptism, but everyone else is like, oh yeah, this is just a full experience, and no one really thinks it's weird. Homelander doesn't specifically outright threaten Hughie, but I feel that this may have been an implication. He feels like Hughie may be hiding something, and he doesn't necessarily know what it is. But Homelander seems to take a lot of joy in perhaps other people's suffering is what it's getting closer towards. Not even necessarily their suffering, but at the very least, their discomfort. He does things intentionally to make people uncomfortable and to assert his dominance. Like when he sits in A-Train's chair specifically while he is grilling him about Popclaw and the Compound V. or when he gets up and forces A-Train into a hug and tells him that he always has an eye on him. He's framing it like he's looking out for him, but truly it is a threat. And that's very similar to what we see in this interaction with Hughie. He's smiling at him the entire time, but I do feel that it carries an implication like, I don't know exactly what you're up to, but I'm on to you, kid. I have an eye on you. Keep your nose clean, kind of thing. But it is really rather threatening because he almost drowns him at that point. Hughie is not far off from struggling underwater and starting to ingest or inhale, really, water into his lungs as he is down underneath there staring up at Homelander. And the interesting thing is that even Ezekiel does not seem to notice. Or if he does notice, perhaps he just doesn't care as long as no one else around them notices. But Homelander doesn't hold anyone else underwater that long. It seems to be in direct response to Hughie being close to Starlight. Not in a possessive way. Homelander doesn't really care about Starlight as far as we can tell. She may as well be an ant to him, just like everyone else. His superiority complex is very much coming through in being there and complaining about his script and being the special guest at Samaritan's Embrace, even though it is Ezekiel's program, because Homelander is the head of the Seven and the first of the superheroes who were found to be super. He is kind of more of a big deal. It's like having a Super Friends event and it's being hosted by the Wonder Twins or something, and then you have Superman come in and you're like, yeah, Superman. So everybody is really excited to see him, and they're too in awe, and they revere him too much to even consider the fact that this man might have some type of nefarious aim, or that he's holding someone underwater too long maliciously. It's all about that brand recognition and that image. It's absolutely wild, but simultaneously very true to life, because monsters aren't monsters to everyone, or there wouldn't be so many of them on the loose. We're going to go on another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about Hughie's confrontation with Ezekiel. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about Hughie entering into the Diamond Access area with Ezekiel, only to find Homelander also there to perform some baptisms. So Homelander holds him under way too long, and because of brand recognition and imaging and reputation, no one really seems to notice that Homelander is about to drown Hughie while just smiling down at him. So now we are getting to the point where everyone has been baptized, and Hughie gets out of the baptismal pool. Everyone has toweled off, and they say their goodbyes. So most of these folks have already changed into their dry clothes that they brought, because they knew what they were getting into. And Homelander and the rest of the folks are leaving. Even Ezekiel is leaving the tent as Hughie is still trying to towel himself off with the towel in his wet Billy Joel clothes. So he is about to panic for a second because it looks like Ezekiel is leaving the tent, because he is. So as everyone else is leaving, Hughie tries to stop him and he's like, wait, I need your /Christ's guidance. And he is using them in conjunction again, because that's how Ezekiel and the other supes are framing this, that they are agents of God, that they have been bestowed these superpowers as a blessing or a miracle from God to help save non-superpowered humans. So Ezekiel finally turns around, he's like, okay, what is it? And Hughie goes to show him his phone, but unfortunately, his phone was in his pocket when he was baptized, and the video seems to be inaccessible. Now, I'm somewhat confused about this part, because Hughie took off his jacket in order to be baptized, so I don't know why he didn't put his phone in his jacket pocket, or if it didn't have any pockets, why he didn't just place his phone with his jacket. But he apparently kept it in his pants the whole time. Maybe he was just too nervous, because it's his first blackmail, baby's first blackmail, you guys. He didn't know what was going on. So he goes to show Ezekiel the phone, but the video is now inaccessible because the phone has been soaked in water, like some really crappy mechanical tea. And so Ezekiel is about to choke him to death when Hughie tells him that he has a video of Ezekiel having intimate relations with Hughie at one of the soup clubs. So that was the video Hughie was going to show him. It wasn't specifically Hughie in the video, but clearly Ezekiel doesn't care about individuals, and he has engaged in this type of behavior enough that really he has no way of remembering who all he has come in contact with. Superhuman memory is not Ezekiel's power. So it's definitely believable. And since Hughie has seen him do this on the night that he went to that soup club with Butcher, he's able to approximate and describe what really happened with the other people, but inserting himself in there. So he tells Ezekiel that he had like a threesome with Ezekiel, and that Hughie's friend has a copy of that compromising video from the soup club, and they'll release it online and make it trend #1 on Twitter if anything happens to Hughie. So Ezekiel backs off with his stretchy Reed Richards-like arms, and he tells Hughie that, he's like, what do you want? Money? What is it that you want? Why are you blackmailing me with this? And Hughie's like, I don't want money. I just want to know about the shipments of Compound V, because they are being shipped through Samaritan's Embrace, and you're marking them as polio vaccines, but they're not polio vaccines, are they? They're Compound V. And Ezekiel is visibly shaken, and he's like, who are you? Like, how do you know this? And that makes sense, because Hughie is such a skinny kid, and is really young, and seems like he's sweet and everything on the outside. And also, this is a big religious event. This is probably the last place Ezekiel would expect to receive any threats at. So Hughie just declines to say who he is or why he's doing this. But he's like, I want this information. And Ezekiel says that he can't tell him because they will destroy him. But he refuses to say who they are. Hughie ultimately gets what he wants, though. And he tells Ezekiel that in addition to getting that information, Ezekiel is also going to cut out the pray the gay away propaganda, and that is essentially what he is receiving in exchange for this blackmail information about the Compound V. And I find it really interesting that Hughie adds that in there. Hughie is asserting himself in this situation because that was not part of his assigned mission in any way. It's kind of like Frenchie going off mission, but he's not doing anything that's truly separate, like a side quest. He's just also tacking this on in addition to the other thing that he has already accomplished. And Hughie is still getting used to asserting himself. It's different when he's telling Frenchie, someone he's tentatively friends with, to please stop calling him Little Hughie, than it is to tack on his own requirement for this blackmail. And Hughie's sexuality hasn't explicitly been stated at any point, although we have shown him to be attracted to Robin, who was female presenting, and also Annie, who is also female presenting up to this point. So Hughie might just be a really cool ally, or he may be bisexual, pansexual, somewhere on the LGBT spectrum. But regardless, he has seen a problem in his environment, something he considers to be a problem, and he's taking measures to address it, which is very different for Hughie. He wasn't even able to stand up for himself before, but now he's asserted himself with Frenchie, and now he is also asserting himself in situations with others on behalf of others. It's a big step for Hughie, and he has had trouble in the past even working his way up to conversations for which he has prepared ahead of time. But in this instance, he is also seizing the opportunity to tack this on in the moment. This isn't even something he planned, but he's like kind of emboldened by how well this has gone so far and the fact that he's actually gotten that information out of Ezekiel. And he's like, you know what? You're also going to cut out that pray away the gay crap. So don't do that anymore either. So he's really becoming more fully who he is. Hughie is stepping into his power more and more. We're watching him take these baby steps and sometimes leaps and bounds by making these in-the-moment decisions, like going ahead and detonating translucent or tacking on this proviso. So it's a big moment for Hughie. We now also see Hughie calling MM once this is over and is telling him about the outcome of the encounter with Ezekiel. MM is very surprised at how much information Hughie was actually able to get from Ezekiel and goes ahead and pays him what he believes to be a compliment for Hughie about how he is just kind of a savant at screwing people over. And Hughie's like, haha, not a compliment. So he has some feelings about it, but also that adrenaline, I think, is starting to wear off a little bit. So Hughie is really starting to come down and realize, ooh, that really could have gone incredibly sideways, but it didn't. So it's a big moment for our boy. But Hughie also tells that the shipments go to hospitals around the U.S., and the most recent shipment is going to the NICU at Mercer Hospital. Then we see Butcher smash his wife's headstone and tell on the phone that he'll meet them in half an hour at the hospital. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we are going to catch up with Homelander. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing Hughie's adventures in blackmail land with Ezekiel, where he was actually a lot better at it than he thought it would be. He does say that it's not cake, like what Butcher had said it would be, but he did accomplish his goal with flying colors. So we also saw Butcher smashing his wife's headstone. There's nothing buried underneath it. He's just very angry at the symbol. It hurts for him to consider the fact that Rebecca could be dead in some way. And so he is just symbolically smashing it and also just getting out his rage. The gravedigger who is on duty is, visibly upset by it. And he's like, hey, man, and tries to stop him. And Billy just goes, relax, it's not a hate crime, and continues. So that was his only response to it. And then he just keeps walking with his sledgehammer. So he felt like that was enough of an explanation. It's really not, but he just keeps on walking. After all, it's his wife's headstone. And what is anyone really going to do to Billy at this point? I mean, they could try to smack him with a shovel, but that's not going to go very well for them, as we have seen with Billy so far. So Billy just casually walks off on the phone with and goes to meet with them at the NICU at Mercer Hospital. Homelander, on the other hand, is still at Believe Expo. So he has come back after having had it out with Madeline in the parking lot of her child's pediatrician's office. And he has decided that since she did not give him what he wanted, which was a new script, that he is going to go off script. So Homelander goes pretty far off script and just does whatever he wanted to do. He says that it's his God-given purpose to protect America and that they need to go overseas as superheroes in the military to protect America and, quote, do the right thing, unquote. So he then cites scripture from the Judeo-Christian Bible about war, and he holds his arms out in an emulation of Jesus Christ on the cross before flying into the air and slowly settling down amongst the people in the crowd. It is very symbolic. This entire episode is highly symbolic in many ways. And it's very much about a lot of them leaning into this religion as a political tool as well. It's not just about politics. It's also about their image and their reputation and branding. If people are identifying them strongly with religion, then they are going to be beyond reproach. Oh no, Homelander wouldn't do that. He is this ordained minister in Samaritan's Embrace. And according to most people who are not directly working with him, he keeps his nose very clean. The folks who work with him know that he's a little bit wonky and scary, but he's so scary, they're not ever going to tell anyone else about it. They do not dare. So he's really gone way far off of the script and is gone down a very conservative pathway, and Stillwell is watching, looking upset and concerned and even a little frightened. Like, she knows she's losing control over him. And Ashley is off stage panicking in PR mode, trying to figure out how to reel this in and what to do to recover from it, because you can't just stop his mic. You can't just prevent Homelander from doing something that Homelander wants to do. They all are realizing that they don't really have control over this pet. It's like trying to keep a raptor as a pet, like a velociraptor / Utah raptor. Like trying to keep one of those as a pet. It's inadvisable. At a certain point, it's going to become more than you can handle, more than you can control. And that's where they are. So Ashley isn't scared in the same way that Stillwell is scared, but Ashley is just like, oh no, how am I going to recover from this? So Starlight is also off stage, and she's looking incredibly uncomfortable at this culmination of events and the rhetoric that she's heard here. She's already had a hard enough time with Believe Expo and with her mom and with Hughie and with things not being the way that she remembered them being, and this not being about love and appreciating her fellow individuals. So this is even more upsetting, because essentially the guy who is somewhat her boss, somewhat her coworker, is advocating for war and retribution, because he's saying we were attacked by terrorists and we need to go over there and do the right thing, making do the right thing synonymous with an act of vengeance in this case. So Starlight's really uncomfortable, and understandably so. And being on this other side of the expo is really eye-opening in a truly upsetting way for her. She had gone into this thinking that this was going to be her people, like how Homelander referred to them as being his people. But he is referring to them as being warmongering and hating foreigners and everything else that he listed off specifically to Stillwell. Whereas for Starlight, she thought that this place was about love and communion and fellowship. And so now it just looks like a lot of hatred instead. And it's interesting to see it juxtaposed as being Starlight's people versus being Homelander's people, and how she felt that they were more like a family. She said that they were like family to her. But for Homelander, they are more of a constituency and a tool to affect the change that he wants in the military and in Congress. So again, this group of people can be more than one thing. Everything is true from a certain point of view. So we also see Queen Maeve in this episode ending up at her ex-girlfriend's house after seemingly having a few drinks. You can tell that they have not seen each other in years, and her ex is really upset that she's shown up. So she lets Maeve in, and Maeve asks where the cat is, but her ex tells her the cat died years ago. And that indicates to us it's been years since they've spoken. But clearly there's still some hurt feelings here. And her ex kind of explains why. She's like, look, I've been out of your life for the past few years, but you've not been out of my life because you're in the public eye, and I still see you everywhere because of the nature of your job. There are giant billboards for you in Times Square and everything else. You're constantly in the news. I can't go anywhere or do anything or have my eyes open, more or less, outside of my own home without seeing you. Or even within my own home. I can't be on the internet without seeing something about you. So yeah, I'm still salty about this. And Maeve, though, is kind of in crisis mode. She's in crisis over Flight 37 because earlier that day they did the press junket / memorial for it, she and Homelander. And that was incredibly upsetting for her because she's just seeing all those faces of people that they didn't save. And it's not even that they couldn't necessarily. They could have saved some, but Homelander chose not to because it would have been worse PR if they had helped a couple of people live and not saved everyone else. And she's really fighting with that. Maeve is someone who wants to do the good wherever she can and alleviate suffering where she sees it. But she is bound by all of these marketing and PR rules to begin with Vought, but now also with Homelander going, no, PR first. He's getting more into the corporate aspect of things as he's trying to get closer to Stillwell and please her. So he is making these decisions that aren't based in humanity in any way. And Maeve doesn't really know how to handle this. And she tells her, sinking against her wardrobe, I think, that she is still thinking about all those people. And her ex is like, what are you talking about? Go ahead and tell me. But Maeve is still kind of drunk and just tries to kiss her, and that upsets her ex. And Maeve really can't tell her about Flight 37. That would put her in danger. Just like A-Train letting Popclaw know about the Compound V ultimately led to putting her in danger. So, since Maeve can't share that with her, she just gets up and leaves. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to find out about the outcome of A-Train's investigation into Frenchie and finding all of his aliases. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing how Annie is doing at Believe Expo, as well as how Maeve and Homelander are doing. Now we're going to talk about where we find Frenchie. So Frenchie's old lady calls him to let him know that he's been burned. So they have found out all about him. Black Noir was outside of his old lady's apartment. So she tells him, if they have gotten so far that they found me and were checking out my apartment, that means that they have all of your aliases. You need to go right now. And then she smashes her phone immediately in the alleyway and runs off. So she's already on the run. And then Frenchie tells MM and Butcher, who are in the NICU, and Butcher instructs him to leave the unnamed woman that they have chained to the wall in the safe house and run. So Frenchie tells the unnamed woman that they are the same, that they're hard on the outside and soft on the inside, and compares them to boiled eggs or to fruit like pineapples. It's kind of endearing as he's rambling on. And he feels this connection with her. So he lets her go again, despite Butcher's orders. First, he unchains her from the wall, and then he undoes her cuffs. And she doesn't kill him. She just runs. He lets her loose, knowing that she fully well could kill him with her bare hands if she wanted to. But she just stares at him for a minute and runs away. At this point, we also see Annie getting ready for her turn to give a speech on the big stage at Believe, where Homelander has given his speech. And Ashley gives her the 15-minute warning while she's in hair and makeup, and Annie asks for time alone with her mom. And she tells her that she doesn't think she can go on stage. And she's explaining herself, and she's going, this place has changed, or maybe I've changed, and I can't do it. Tell them I'm not going on. And her mom, instead of supporting her or hearing her really in any way, turns it around and makes it all about herself. And she says, I've waited 23 years for this. And she's listing off all of the things she's done for Annie over the years, and then says that all of her friends will be watching this. And you can see that Annie feels utterly alone and unsupported. She's already feeling a little bit used by Hughie, and now she's really feeling used and ignored by her mom. She doesn't feel like she's prioritized in any way in anyone's life, and none of this is what she thought it was. So Annie is undergoing a paradigm shift in her life right now. Annie spent so much of her life living for other people, and now she is learning how to also live for herself, how to stand up for herself, even though she's super powerful physically. In a lot of ways, she's never had to assert herself. But just like Hughie asserted himself earlier with Ezekiel in tacking on his own demands to the blackmail that were ostensibly selfless as well, from what we know. He was acting as a solid ally, although if Hughie is LGBT, I'm here for that too. But he goes ahead and has tacked that on, and that's him asserting himself. And Annie is asserting herself by finally talking to her mom about this. But her mom is just not hearing it. Even though Annie is saying, this place has changed, or maybe I've changed, Annie has a level of self-awareness at this point to go ahead and step back and go, maybe I'm different, and maybe that's okay. Maybe I'm just becoming a new person. Because she is. She's stepping into her power. She's stepping into who she is, just like Hughie is. And sometimes it's these baby steps, and sometimes it's leaps and bounds. So her telling her mom she doesn't want to go on, that's kind of a baby step. But we also see that Annie is making leaps and bounds in this episode. Both of our heroes are on these parallel journeys in that way. But this time we also see the Deep, and he is in trouble with the media and the public in general, because he was totally caught trying to free that dolphin from Ocean Land. The cops apparently did not care that he was the Deep, and the media totally covered him being outside holding, chunks of the dolphin after it was ejected through the windshield of the truck he was driving and was ran over by a 16-wheeler or an 18-wheeler. So he is sitting there at the Vought 7 headquarters, just drowning his sorrows in Little Debbie cakes as he's watching the news. And he can't handle watching the news footage of himself and his dead dolphin friend. So he goes ahead and flips it over to Believe Expo just as Starlight is going on stage. And she starts reading from the teleprompter, but she can't keep doing it. She tells them to stop the music. And Homelander has also gone off script, and she could tell that as well. So maybe she also feels a little emboldened by his choices. Who's to say? But she tells them to stop the music and begins talking directly to her mother while she's still wearing the headset. And she looks at her and says, "You want me to just suck it up and do this for you?" And then she goes way off script and, like Homelander, tells the public that she's going off script. But Homelander was there for more of his own personal vendetta in this PR stunt, whereas Annie is truly here for the people and is telling them that she can't lie to them in this way. She's told enough lies today to the teens in the teen panel, and she is done being dishonest. That's not how she was raised to be. So her mother raised her to mostly be compliant and to be determined and become this superhero for her mom's glory, apparently. But she also raised Annie to be a kind-hearted young woman. And now that kind-heartedness is being paired with her determination, and she's baring her teeth in this way. So she's telling them that, like everyone else, Annie has no idea what the answers are out there, and that anyone who says they have the answers is lying. And that is such an adult truth that it really resonated with me. I have found that out as I've gotten older, that pretty much everyone is winging it, you guys. You shouldn't feel bad about where you are or the attempts that you're making. Definitely hold up that mirror and hold yourself accountable for your choices, but also understand that you can make better choices and that there are other folks out there also making choices and taking actions that don't entirely serve them. Even folks who are very highly revered. And now that Annie is one of the 7, she realizes that no one really has it together. And she admits she doesn't know what she's doing, and she's just as scared and confused as anyone else. It's a very real moment. And then she becomes further emboldened, and she says that the one thing she does know is that she's done taking anyone's crap, and she's done pretending. And she also references the fact that someone had sexually assaulted her, although she doesn't say who. So the Deep is understandably in a panic right now because that is him that she's talking about. And unlike Homelander, at the end of Annie's speech, the only person who claps for her is Hughie. And she's really stepped into her truth at this point. This is one of those leaps and bounds moments, like when Hughie blew up Translucent. And just like real life, sometimes stepping into your truth isn't entirely palatable, or it isn't necessarily comforting or well received. But that is something that you really still have to do. And we see that with Annie. Hughie's the only one clapping, and everyone else mostly seems stunned right now. People are in shock at how she's standing up for herself, the way that she's delivering it, the words that she's using, as well as the content. And so it's a lot for everyone, but it's also very important for this paradigm shift of who Annie is. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we are going to wrap up this episode with Hughie and Annie, as well as Butcher and MM, and where Black Noir, Madeline, and Homelander are. Stay tuned.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back Before the break, we were talking about Annie really asserting herself on stage in a very public venue that is being live televised, really. So now we're going to talk about what Butcher and MM are up to, as well as what happens after Annie walks off stage. So Butcher and MM are in that NICU now, and they discover that the supes are not born that way, but they're in fact made in a lab, more or less. They have these children in the NICU in different cities in the US, and there's a lot of layers of security to get back there, but once they are back there, they see that the compound V is being introduced into the children's bodies via an IV. And they are a little stunned, and they're not really shocked because they already know that these people are capable of some messed up stuff, but it's also really unethical. It's maybe even too far for Butcher to be doing these experiments on children. So we are also seeing his ethical line. Meanwhile, we see Hughie finding Annie where she's walked off stage into the area outside of the festival. And as he approaches her, she's already been crying, she's upset, and she goes off on him. And she totally calls him out for using her for getting tickets to see Ezekiel. And Hughie comes clean about Robin having died and how the expo hasn't helped him. Nothing has really helped him except for the words that Annie has said that day, that they're the only thing that makes sense and that she's right, that nobody knows what's going on. And she apologizes to him for popping off on him, and he, apologizes as well. He was definitely in the wrong. And they hug it out. And it's a very sweet, tender moment. Now, Hughie hasn't come clean completely with Annie, but he does let her know essentially, hey, that day we met on the bench, my girlfriend died, and I have been trying to piece myself back together since then, and nothing that's happened here has made any sense except for what you had to say today. Essentially saying that even the diamond experience that he thought would help him wouldn't. Or at least that's how Annie is interpreting it. So they are both recognizing themselves in being alone, but also by being alone in parallel ways, they are alone together and they're hugging it out. So we get back to MM and Butcher, and they're drawing a vial of compound V from that baby's IV bag when the bad guys come in. So this particular baby shoots blue lasers from its eyes, like Homelander shoots red lasers from his eyes. So Butcher picks up the baby and points it at the bad guys and slices them up with the blue laser eyes. It is incredibly gory, as one might expect. This isn't like being killed with a lightsaber where you are more or less cauterizing the wound and so guts aren't spewing everywhere. It is just a lot, you guys. There are guts everywhere, and he's just holding on to this baby by supporting its body and having another hand supporting its head and just turning it around. So this is a small infant, and the baby is just opening its eyes and shooting lasers at people because it can't really control it, but then suddenly the laser stops working because, again, the baby's not doing this intentionally. It has no control over it. And so he just looks at it like he wants to shake it maybe, but he doesn't because it's a baby. And he just turns it back to the bad guys again and goes ahead and swipes through the rest of them with the baby. I don't know what to call it. Lasering? He just lasers through them. That's what Homelander tends to refer to it as, is lasering. So he lasers the rest of the bad guys as soon as the baby is functioning again. And then he tucks the baby back into its incubator and tells it to be a good little fella and keep its nose clean, or otherwise he'll be back for it. And it's such a weird moment because he is telling it that in an affectionate way. And he says, otherwise I'll come back and stomp you. So Butcher does think that all supes are bad. And from a certain perspective, it's like the concept of, would you kill baby Hitler? Because Billy does believe that all supes are bad. At least that's what he keeps saying. But if he entirely believed that, he would be more inclined, I think, to go ahead and kill this baby. But seemingly, Billy is still above killing an infant. So it's a very interesting line because he does say it affectionately, like he likes kids, but he also thinks that all supes are bad. But there's just this overlap area where he's like, I can't kill a baby though. He will draw a line. So he'll also use the baby though as a weapon. So he wasn't using it as a shield, he was using it as the weapon itself. So he's not above that, but he is above killing them, seemingly. So perhaps, maybe deep down, Billy doesn't truly believe that all supes are bad, and it's more so just his anger speaking. But at this point, we also get to see Madeline watching news coverage of Starlight's admission at Believe Expo. And as she's watching it, she sees Homelander outside on the security footage, staring at that picture of himself that we've seen him staring at a lot in the hallway. And it turns out that that picture is mounted on the wall outside of Madeline's office. So when he's been standing there, he's not been looking at himself. He's been looking through the walls at her. So she just starts speaking aloud to him in a normal volume in her empty office with her door closed, and tells him that she knows he's been out there and that she knows he's felt like he hasn't gotten enough attention lately, but that he can't be bad and give speeches like that. And he enters into the room with her, and this conversation takes a very weird turn. It becomes kind of a kinky, maternal, sexual encounter, with him laying in her lap and her calling him a good boy. And she seems to have decided to use fawning and manipulation to keep him in check, since she's losing her overall grip on him. He's not just listening to her anymore, so now she is going to have to try something else. So she's not really seemingly had a sexual relationship with him before, even though that seems like something he has definitely wanted. But she has decided to use this tool at her disposal, lest she completely lose control over the most dangerous man on the planet. Now, she's not doing it out of the goodness of her heart. Madeline is doing it because Madeline likes control. She is just going out there and making sure that she is controlling the situation and that this doesn't get dangerous personally for her and perhaps even for Teddy. But it's still a really interesting left turn that they take. It makes sense in the flow of the story, but it's also telling us a lot about Madeline too, and a lot about Homelander. So he is really into this type of thing, and he has some type of association with her as a mother figure, even as he sexualizes her. We also see Black Noir coming after Frenchie, and just as Black Noir is about to take Frenchie out, the unnamed woman comes back and takes on Black Noir so that Frenchie can get away. But despite her own prowess in fighting, especially in hand-to-hand combat and just ripping people's organs and stuff out of their bodies in full beast mode, Black Noir is still better trained overall, seemingly, and he manages to slice through her abdomen very severely and runs off believing that she is dead. And we see her just bleeding out as they play Ain't No Sunshine. And it's a really beautiful scene. I love the music choice that they selected for that. And Frenchie also comes back for her, just as she came back for him. And he's visibly very upset that she's dead. But just as he's covering her with his jacket, she opens her eyes and he sees her wounds knitting back together. So she's somewhere between Wolverine and Beast, as far as I can tell. and she takes his hand, and he tells her that she's a miracle as he smiles down at her in relief and awe. It's a very beautiful moment. It also gave me flashbacks to Resident Evil Extinction when Alice is going in and fighting the doctor, and she sees the other Alice in the pod that looks kind of like a gestation pod, and that Alice falls out of there and you think that she's dead, and Alice covers her with the jacket only for her to save her later on. I really enjoyed how much symbolism this episode had, as well as these benchmarks on our heroes' journeys as they're growing together, even as they're becoming different people. Sometimes as you grow apart, and sometimes you grow together. And this is really sweet, kind of how Annie and how Hughie are growing together, although there is still this huge secret in between them that may cause problems down the line. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.